Every year, Americans spend over $30 billion on fish oil capsules. 30 billion. Little amber bottles lined up on pharmacy shelves, promising to do what the human diet has done naturally for thousands of years without the pill, without the processing, without the plastic. And here's what almost no one talks about. The Book of Numbers records that the ancient Israelites received manna in the wilderness and still longed for fish, not for survival. For the fats, the ancients understood, even without laboratories, that certain foods carried something the body could not make on its own. Today, we're counting down 13 foods rich in omega-3 fatty acids, many of them sitting in your kitchen right now, quietly ignored. Pay close attention to number 1. Most homeowners pull it out of their garden beds and throw it away. And laboratory analysis has found it contains more omega-3 fat than almost any other leafy plant ever tested. And when we reach number 4, I'll tell you about a group of Greek monks on a remote peninsula who have been eating this way for over 1,000 years, and what their health outcomes have quietly told researchers ever since. Let's get into it. Number 13. Kiwi. Nobody reaches for a kiwi and thinks about their cardiovascular system. They think about vitamin C, maybe digestion. But Proverbs 24 speaks of honey from the comb as nature's concentrated gift, sweet, complete, requiring nothing added. Kiwi operates on a similar principle. Everything useful is already inside, including the part most people overlook entirely, the seeds. The ancient Maori of New Zealand, who called the fruit kiwi after their native bird, incorporated it into medicinal plant knowledge long before Western nutritionists measured its contents. Traditional Chinese medicine valued related Actinidia species for their cooling properties and their effect on digestive harmony, a use that spans at least 8 centuries of recorded practice. Polynesian cultures independently developed ritual uses for the fruit's enzyme content, applying it to tenderize meat and support recovery from illness. The tiny black seeds, scattered through kiwi flesh, carry alpha-linolenic acid, the plant form omega-3. Your body cannot manufacture on its own. You swallow them without noticing every time you eat the fruit whole, which means you're already getting a quiet, consistent contribution to your daily fat intake. Beyond the seeds, kiwi contains actinidin, a protein-digesting enzyme studied for its ability to ease digestion after heavy meals, particularly useful as digestive enzyme. Production naturally declines. After age 60, research has pointed to improved sleep quality when kiwi is eaten in the evening, likely connected to its measurable serotonin content working alongside antioxidant load. Clinical trials on platelet function have found that daily kiwi consumption modestly reduces triglyceride levels, a combination of effects researchers consider worth exploring further in the context of cardiovascular support. Here is a preparation detail most people miss entirely. The skin, the fuzzy outer layer of kiwi, holds a significant concentration of fiber and additional antioxidant compounds in some analyses, more than the flesh itself. Rubbing the skin with a damp cloth removes the fuzz, sliced thin, skin included, into a small bowl of plain yogurt. Each morning is genuinely the simplest way to capture everything the fruit carries. 2 kiwis daily. Seeds, and all stacks small contributions toward the same goal a supplement aims for, without the capsule and without the shelf degradation. The Maori didn't analyze alpha-linolenic acid content. They noticed which foods made the body feel right across generations. The science is now examining why. Number 12. Walnuts. Ounce for ounce. Walnuts carry more plant-based omega-3 fat than any other tree nut on Earth. That's not a marketing claim. It appears consistently across independent nutrition databases, a measurable fact that holds up under scrutiny. The Book of Song of Solomon mentions the walnut garden as a place of beauty and abundance, and ancient Persian manuscripts record walnut oil as a daily household staple, valued for mental clarity. Ayurvedic physicians in India classified walnuts as a medhya rasayana, a brain-nourishing food at least 2,000 years ago. That same designation appears in writings from Greek physicians of the Hippocratic tradition, specifically noting the walnut's resemblance to the human brain as a sign of its intended use. Multiple civilizations arriving independently at the same conclusion about the same nut is worth paying attention to. The fat in walnuts is alpha-linolenic acid, which requires conversion in the body into the more biologically active EPA and DHA forms found in fish. That conversion is real, though it's not 100% efficient. But the anti-inflammatory benefits keep appearing across independent trials, regardless reduced markers of systemic inflammation, improved cholesterol ratios, better arterial flexibility in regular walnut consumers compared to non-consumers. What receives less attention is what walnuts do below the stomach. Their specific fiber and polyphenol content feed bacterial strains linked to lower inflammation throughout the digestive tract. Researchers have documented measurably different gut microbiome profiles in walnut eaters more favorable, more diverse than in people who skip them. Cognitive trials, tracking older adults over several months, have recorded improvements in memory and processing speed in walnut-consuming groups. Results: researchers consider worth sustained investigation. A small handful, roughly 7 halves, is sufficient. The critical preparation note: omega-3 fats oxidize easily once the shell is removed. Buying whole walnuts and cracking them yourself, or storing shelled walnuts, sealed in a glass jar in the refrigerator, preserves the fat content instead of letting it degrade on a warm pantry shelf. Rancid walnut fat is not just less beneficial, it carries compounds that work against the anti-inflammatory effects you're trying to capture. Ancient Persian households stored their walnut oil in sealed clay vessels kept underground. They didn't know about oxidation. They knew from observation that temperature and exposure to air changed the quality of what they had. The research is now explaining the chemistry behind what they already practiced. Number 11. Edamame. Edamame appears at the beginning of sushi restaurant meals as something to keep your hands busy while you wait. It deserves a second and more careful look. These are immature soybeans, steamed in the pod, and the nutritional combination they carry is genuinely unusual among plant foods. Soy has one of the oldest documented relationships with human civilization. Chinese agricultural records from around 2800 BCE classify soybeans among the 5 sacred grains, a status not given for flavor alone. Japanese Buddhist monks who adopted a plant-based diet beginning in the 6th century CE relied on soy in multiple forms as their primary protein source for over a millennium. The specific choice of immature, the green soybeans appears in Japanese culinary tradition going back to at least the 8th century, with written records noting their ease of digestion compared to mature dried beans. Most plant proteins are incomplete, missing one or more essential amino acids. Edamame is not. It delivers a full amino acid profile alongside meaningful alpha-linolenic acid content, which is rare outside of animal sources. The isoflavones in edamame plant compounds, structurally related to estrogen, have been studied across extensive clinical research for cardiovascular effects, lower LDL cholesterol, improved arterial flexibility, outcomes that work alongside the omega-3 content rather than independently of it. A single cup delivers roughly a third of a day's fiber needs, which slows the rate at which natural sugars reach the bloodstream and promotes lasting satiety. Folate content is a particular strength edamame ranks among the richest plant sources available, important for cell division and DNA repair at every age. Manganese, a mineral involved in bone formation and the enzymes your body uses to neutralize oxidative stress, is present in amounts that cover most of a day's requirement per serving. Frozen edamame retains its nutritional profile nearly as well as fresh. A bag in the freezer, steamed for 5 minutes with a pinch of sea salt, requires no further preparation. Japanese monastery kitchens have prepared it nearly identically for over 1,000 years. Simplicity, sustained by observation of outcome, tends to be worth respecting. Number 10. Brussels sprouts. Brussels sprouts spent decades on the list of foods people ate only under protest. Boiled into a bitter, soggy heap, roasted properly, they are an entirely different food and a genuinely useful plant-based omega-3 source that almost never gets mentioned in that context. The crucifer family of plants, which includes Brussels sprouts, appears in Roman agricultural texts as a valued medicinal crop. Cato the Elder wrote about cabbage and related plants in the 2nd century BCE as remedies for digestive complaints and as general tonics for vitality. Medieval European monastery gardens maintained cruciferous vegetables as part of their medicinal herb plots alongside calendula and valerian. In traditional Korean medicine, cruciferous vegetables were fermented and used specifically for their effects on digestive strength and seasonal illness resistance, a use documented across centuries of written practice. Brussels sprouts carry alpha-linolenic acid in meaningful amounts relative to their calorie content. Their glucosinolate compounds, the sulfur-containing molecules responsible for that sharp smell during cooking, have been studied specifically for their ability to activate the body's own detoxification enzyme systems, particularly those centered in the liver. Sulforaphane, concentrated in the crucifer family, works differently from most antioxidants. Rather than supplying antioxidants directly, it switches on the genetic pathways that produce your body's endogenous antioxidant defenses. That distinction matters more than it sounds. 1 cup delivers close to 4 grams of fiber, feeding gut bacteria that produce short-chain fatty acids linked to lower intestinal inflammation. Vitamin K content from a single serving exceeds a full day's requirement relevant to both bone density maintenance and proper clotting function. 2 concerns that become increasingly important after 60. Roasting at high heat, halved. Tossed with a tablespoon of olive oil. Cut side down on a baking sheet. At 425 degrees, until the edges char, slightly converts what boiling destroys into what the palate craves. Natural sugars caramelize rather than leach out into water. People who refused Brussels sprouts as children routinely discover, with this preparation, that they had simply never eaten them correctly. Roman physicians didn't have randomized controlled trials. They had centuries of dietary observation and extensive written records. The research is now measuring what they recorded empirically. Number 9. Spinach. Spinach's reputation in popular nutrition begins and ends with iron. The fat content is the gap in that story. And it's worth closing. In Persia, where spinach was cultivated as a crop as early as the 4th century CE, it was documented as isfanaj, a food, prized for strengthening the body in winter and supporting clear thinking. It arrived in Arab medicine by the 7th century, then reached European monasteries through Moorish Spain, where monks grew it in medicinal gardens alongside herbs. The Arab physician Ibn Sina, writing in the 11th century, described spinach as a gentle food that cleansed and opened the organ's language. That sounds metaphorical, but likely tracked genuine digestive observations accumulated over generations. Spinach contains alpha-linolenic acid in its leaf membrane structure, where the plant uses it for its own cellular function. The concentration isn't the highest on this list, but spinach delivers it within such extraordinary nutrient density per calorie that the cumulative effect is significant. Lutein and zeaxanthin, 2 carotenoids that concentrate directly in the retina, are among spinach's most studied compounds specifically for their role in protecting against age-related macular degeneration, the leading cause of irreversible vision loss after 60. Omega-3 fats appear to work alongside these carotenoids in a shared protective pathway in the eye, not as separate mechanisms. That synergy makes spinach particularly valuable for long-term visual health. Nitrates in spinach convert in the body to nitric oxide, which relaxes blood vessel walls and improves circulation, a mechanism confirmed extensively enough that endurance athletes now use spinach and other nitrate-rich foods strategically to improve performance. A preparation note worth knowing: brief cooking increases the bioavailability of several of spinach's key compounds, including calcium and certain antioxidants. Though it reduces vitamin C, a quick sauté in a teaspoon of olive oil, which also helps absorb the fat-soluble nutrients, is more efficient preparation than eating it exclusively raw. Ibn Sina didn't know about nitric oxide or macular carotenoids. He recorded what consistent observation told him this plant did. The science is now examining the mechanisms. Number 8. Pumpkin seeds. Every autumn, millions of people carve pumpkins, scoop the seeds into a bowl, and throw them in the trash. That's discarding one of the most nutrient-dense seeds available. In Aztec and Mesoamerican agricultural traditions, pumpkin seeds called pepitas were ground into sauces, pressed for oil, and used medicinally for conditions involving the urinary tract and prostate. Their use in medicine predates European contact by centuries and is documented in pre-Columbian sources. Indigenous North American tribes across multiple language groups used pumpkin seed preparations for parasitic intestinal conditions, a use that was later investigated scientifically and found to have measurable basis in the seed's cucurbitine content. Chinese traditional medicine documented pumpkin seed use for kidney support and male reproductive health, beginning at least in the Ming Dynasty period. A single ounce of pumpkin seeds covers a significant portion of your daily magnesium requirement, a mineral involved in over 300 enzymatic processes, including muscle contraction, nerve signaling, and blood sugar regulation. A large share of older adults don't get enough. Zinc content is where pumpkin seeds genuinely stand out among plant foods. Few seeds or nuts carry their zinc concentration. And zinc plays a direct role in immune function, wound healing, and testosterone production in men. The traditional use of pumpkin seeds for prostate health has specific research support linked to this zinc content, working alongside plant sterols found in the seed. Tryptophan, the amino acid the body converts first into serotonin, then into melatonin, is present in pumpkin seeds in measurable amounts. Eating them a few hours before sleep has been studied as a mild, diet-based approach to supporting sleep quality through this conversion pathway. With results researchers consider cautiously promising. The preparation is nearly free. Rinse seeds from the carved pumpkin, pat dry, spread on a baking sheet, and roast at 300 degrees for 20 minutes. The Hullon variety retains more fiber, sea salt, and a small amount of olive oil is all the preparation required. The Aztec civilization did not conduct clinical trials. They maintained detailed records of what worked across hundreds of years of agricultural and medicinal practice. The research is beginning to confirm what those records described. Number 7. Avocado. Here is a common misconception worth correcting directly. Avocado is not primarily an omega-3 food. Most of its fat is monounsaturated oleic acid, the same fat that dominates olive oil. Its alpha-linolenic content is modest, but avocado earns its place on this list through a different mechanism entirely. And understanding it changes how you think about the other foods in this countdown. Aztec and Mayan civilization regarded avocado as a food of significant status. The Aztec word ahuacatel appears in records describing it as a food, given specifically to those who needed to regain strength. Inca agricultural traditions documented avocado as food for warriors, valued precisely for its fat density, when other calories were scarce. Traditional Central American medicine used avocado leaf and seed in preparations for digestive complaints and blood pressure concerns, uses that modern botanical research has found partially supported in the mechanisms of the plant's polyphenol content. Avocado dramatically increases the absorption of fat-soluble nutrients from every food eaten alongside it. Beta-carotene absorption from a salad containing avocado can increase by several 100% compared to the same salad eaten without it. This means adding avocado to a meal containing spinach, kale, or pumpkin seeds isn't simply adding another food. It's increasing the return on every other item in the bowl. That multiplier effect is likely why it was valued for recovery, not because of what it contained alone, but because of what it helped the body actually absorb from everything else. Potassium content in a single avocado exceeds that of a banana, supporting blood pressure regulation and nerve function. Fiber content close to 10 grams per fruit feeds beneficial gut bacteria and stabilizes blood sugar after meals. Glutathione precursors in avocado support the body's primary cellular detoxification pathway. Half an avocado daily sliced into a salad with the spinach, walnuts, and pumpkin seeds already on this list is a reasonable habit. But don't mistake it for your omega-3 source. Think of it as the food that makes every other food on this countdown work harder. The Aztec healers didn't know about fat-soluble nutrient absorption kinetics. They observed that avocado made people who were depleted become strong again faster when eaten alongside other foods. The research is now explaining the biochemistry of what they observed. Number 6. Kale. Kale spent a decade as the symbol of health food culture, praised mostly for vitamin K and antioxidants. Its fat content and the specific character of its mineral profile rarely entered the conversation. And that's a gap worth filling. Ancient Greek and Roman agricultural texts document kale and its close relatives extensively. It was among the earliest cultivated leafy vegetables in the Mediterranean, documented as a dietary staple by Greek physicians of the classical period. Roman legions carried dried kale on military campaigns, not for luxury, but because it kept traveled and sustained energy. In conditions where fresh food was unavailable, medieval Scottish peasant culture relied on kale so heavily that the word kale in Scots dialect became synonymous with the evening meal itself. That ubiquity across social classes and centuries is its own form of evidence. Kale contains alpha-linolenic acid in measurable amounts, tied to its cell membrane structure. The distinction from spinach that matters most nutritionally, kale's calcium content is unusually high for a leafy green, and critically kale lacks the high oxalate levels found in spinach that can block calcium absorption. What kale lists on paper, the body actually uses at a much higher rate than it does from spinach, making it a genuinely superior calcium source, despite containing less per cup. Sulforaphane and related glucosinolate compounds, shared with Brussels sprouts, support liver detoxification enzyme activity, while the omega-3 content contributes anti-inflammatory fat simultaneously, two distinct mechanisms operating on the same problem from different directions. Beta-carotene content in kale requires dietary fat for absorption, which means eating kale with olive oil or alongside avocado isn't a culinary choice. It's a biochemical necessity for getting the full benefit. Iron in plant foods is typically poorly absorbed. Eating kale alongside a vitamin C source like the kiwi, already on this list, measurably increases iron uptake through a well-documented mechanism. Massaging raw kale with a teaspoon of olive oil and a squeeze of lemon for 2 to 3 minutes before eating breaks down the tough, fibrous structure and removes much of the bitterness. Lightly sautéed, it holds on to nearly all of its fat-soluble nutrients while becoming genuinely pleasant. Roman legions didn't carry it because it tasted exceptional. They carried it because it worked. The research is now examining precisely how. If this kind of ancient knowledge resonates with you, hit like and subscribe, because what's coming next goes even deeper. Number 5. Pomegranate. Pomegranate appears on Omega-3 food lists regularly, and a clarification is necessary before we go further because the reality is actually more interesting than the simplified version. The pomegranate is one of the oldest documented fruits in human religious and medicinal history. It appears in the Book of Numbers as one of the fruits brought back by scouts from Canaan, described alongside figs and grapes as evidence of an exceptionally fertile land. In ancient Egyptian medicine, papyrus records from approximately 1,500 BCE document pomegranate rind as a treatment for intestinal parasites, a use validated centuries later in controlled research. The Quran mentions pomegranate 3 times as a fruit of paradise. Ayurvedic medicine classified it as a tridoshic food, beneficial across all constitutional types, a rare designation indicating broad therapeutic value. The seeds and the oil pressed from them contain punicic acid, a fat closely related to omega-3, but technically classified in its own conjugated linolenic acid category. Research on punicic acid has found genuine anti-inflammatory effects through pathways that overlap with but are distinct from traditional omega-3 mechanisms. Where pomegranate's real strength lies in this context, however, is in what it does to omega-3 fats from other sources. Omega-3 fatty acids are chemically unstable. They oxidize readily when exposed to heat, light, or oxygen, and oxidized omega-3 is not only unhelpful, but produces compounds that work against what you're trying to accomplish. The elagitannins in Pomegranate, when broken down by gut bacteria, produce compounds with measurable antioxidant activity, specifically protective of polyunsaturated fats. Eating pomegranate seeds alongside walnuts or flax isn't just a flavor pairing. It's functionally protective of the fats you're trying to deliver intact to your cells. Eat the seeds whole rather than juicing them. The pulp and membrane carry fiber and additional polyphenol content that juice discards entirely. A handful of pomegranate seeds scattered over a salad with walnuts and spinach turns 3 entries from this countdown into a single dish that accomplishes more together than the sum of its parts. Ancient Egyptian physicians didn't know about polyunsaturated fat oxidation. They recorded what pomegranate did across clinical observations spanning centuries. The research is now measuring the chemistry behind what they saw. Number 4. Kale. Picture the Halkidiki Peninsula in northern Greece. A narrow finger of land extending into the Aegean Sea, covered in dense forest. Ancient stone monasteries perched on cliffs above the water. Mount Athos. For over 1,000 years, since approximately 963 CE, a community of Orthodox Christian monks has lived here under strict dietary rules that prohibit meat and for much of the year. Fish oil, what they eat instead, wild greens gathered from the hillsides. Legumes, olive oil, walnuts, and the foods that grow in their garden plots, purslane, spinach, pumpkin seeds, the plants this countdown has been describing. In 2012, a team of cardiologists from Greece published research on the cardiovascular health outcomes of the Mount Athos monastic community. What they found caused considerable discussion in nutritional research circles, despite advanced age, despite no access to pharmaceutical interventions for most of their lives, despite what most modern physicians would consider a caloric restriction that should indicate nutritional deprivation. The monks showed cardiovascular and metabolic markers that would be exceptional in men decades younger. The researchers noted particularly low levels of inflammatory markers and lipid oxidation, the very measurements that predict long-term cardiovascular resilience. That isn't poetry. That's a description of what a diet rich in plant-based omega-3 sources, consumed consistently over an entire adult lifetime, does to measurable biological outcomes. The monks didn't design their diet with those endpoints in mind. They followed a rule of life established by their community, based on Orthodox fasting tradition and what the land provided, what they were eating. The purslane, pulled from garden beds. The walnuts gathered in autumn. The wild greens contained the specific fatty acids, polyphenols, and antioxidant compounds that the research community is now spending considerable resources trying to understand. 1,000 years of consistent practice. The science is still examining why it works. Number 3. Sesame seeds. Sesame seeds get sprinkled on bread and largely ignored. They deserve considerably more attention than that. Sesame is among the oldest oilseed crops in human history. Babylonian texts from approximately 3000 BCE record sesame oil being traded in substantial quantities. Indian Vedic texts from the same era describe sesame as a sacred substance used in ritual and as a daily food for health. In ancient Egypt, sesame was used as a medicine, and as staple seeds have been found in tomb offerings dating to the reign of Ramesses II, the pharaoh whose court features in the Book of Exodus. Ancient Chinese medical texts classify sesame as a superior herb, a designation reserved for substances considered safe for long-term use with broad benefits across multiple body systems. That identical classification, appearing across unrelated civilizations, spanning several thousand years of recorded history, is a pattern worth taking seriously. Beyond meaningful alpha-linolenic acid content, sesame seeds contain sesamin and sesamolin, 2 lignin compounds studied specifically for liver protective and cholesterol-modifying effects. Clinical research has found that regular sesame consumption lowers LDL cholesterol and increases antioxidant capacity in the bloodstream through mechanisms distinct from and additive to its omega-3 content. The calcium content of unhulled sesame seeds, the variety with the outer seed coat still intact, rivals or exceeds dairy sources by weight. This is a significant detail for anyone limiting dairy who assumes plant foods cannot replace it adequately. Copper content in sesame seeds is another standout. Copper is essential for collagen synthesis, iron metabolism, and the function of dozens of enzymatic processes throughout the body, yet it rarely appears in general nutrition guidance, despite being widely underconsumed. A preparation note with research support: lightly toasting sesame seeds before use intensifies flavor and, according to some analysis, increases the bioavailability of their antioxidant compounds. Tahini sesame ground into paste concentrates everything these seeds carry into an easy, storable, daily addition. 1 tablespoon stirred into warm water with a teaspoon of raw honey and a squeeze of lemon makes a morning drink that Ayurvedic tradition has recommended for over 2,000 years. Modern analysis is finding the mechanisms behind why. Babylonian merchants didn't transport sesame across the ancient world because they understood lignin chemistry. They understood, through generations of careful observation, that it did something the body needed. The research is still mapping what that something is. Number 2. Flaxseed. Flaxseed occupies a unique position in both ancient and modern nutrition history that most people who take it daily don't fully appreciate. The Book of Joshua references the flax harvest in Jericho specifically. The stalks of flax stored on Rahab's rooftop, where she hid the Israelite scouts. Flax was so fundamental to ancient Near Eastern life that it functioned simultaneously as textile, food, and medicine. Ancient Egyptian physicians, working from texts later compiled in the Ebers Papyrus around 1550 BCE, document flaxseed preparations for intestinal inflammation. Hippocrates himself recommended flaxseed for intestinal complaints and mucous membrane irritation, a use so consistent it appears across Greek, Arab, and medieval European medical writing for over 2,000 years, before modern research confirmed its mechanism. Ground flaxseed carries the highest alpha-linolenic acid concentration of any food in a standard human diet, higher even than walnuts. 1 tablespoon of ground flaxseed provides approximately 600 milligrams of ALA, meeting or exceeding the recommended adequate intake in a single addition to a morning smoothie. But the preparation detail most people miss is critical. Whole flax seeds pass through the digestive system, largely intact. The lignins and fats are locked inside a hard outer shell the body cannot reliably break. Ground flaxseed, ideally freshly ground in small batches, delivers the fat content into the digestive tract in a form the body can actually absorb. The lignins in flax are among the most concentrated plant lignin sources known, with ongoing research examining their role in hormone metabolism and cellular protection from oxidative stress. Flax oil, while concentrated, loses the fiber and lignin content that make whole ground flaxseed more than just a fat source. It also oxidizes extremely rapidly. Flaxseed oil should never be heated, should be stored sealed in the refrigerator, and should be used within weeks of opening. 1 tablespoon of freshly ground flaxseed stirred into yogurt or oatmeal each morning is the simplest implementation. The Egyptian physicians of the Ebers Papyrus didn't know about alpha-linolenic acid or lignin chemistry. They knew, across centuries of careful observation, that this seed did something useful enough to document and preserve. The research is still uncovering the extent of what they were observing. Number 1. Purslane. Most people have crouched in their garden beds, grabbed this low-growing succulent by the stem, pulled it up, and thrown it in the compost without a second thought. That is one of the more consequential nutritional mistakes a home gardener can make. Purslane portulaca oleracea is found growing through cracked pavement, along driveways, and in garden beds across nearly every inhabited region of Earth. It requires no cultivation, no irrigation, no soil preparation. It simply appears, and multiple independent laboratory analyses have established it as the richest leafy vegetable source of alpha-linolenic acid ever tested, containing more omega-3 fat per gram than almost any cultivated green grown specifically for nutritional value. The Prophet Muhammad is recorded in Hadith literature as calling purslane a blessed plant. In ancient Greek medicine, Dioscorides classified it in Demeteria medica as a cooling herb effective for intestinal complaints and inflammatory conditions. Traditional Chinese medicine has used ma qi xian purslane for over 2,000 years for skin disorders, intestinal parasites, and inflammatory conditions, with documentation appearing in Tang Dynasty medical texts and continuing through every subsequent period of Chinese medical writing. In traditional Mexican cuisine, verdolagas purslane is cooked with pork and chilies, a dish that appears in pre-Columbian food records and remains in active use today. Greek salads, in certain regional traditions, included alongside cucumber and tomato. Turkish semizotu salads. Dress it with olive oil and lemon. These are unrelated cultures, on different continents, separated by oceans and centuries, arriving independently, at the same conclusion, about the same weed. That pattern of convergence, independent discovery of the same use across unrelated civilizations, is among the strongest signals in traditional botanical medicine that a plant is doing something genuinely significant. What the laboratory analysis reveals about why purslane's omega-6 to omega-3 ratio sits far closer to what pre-industrial human diets typically carried than almost any other plant food available today. Most modern diets run at omega-6 to omega-3 ratios of 15 to 1 or higher, driven largely by industrial seed oils introduced to the food supply in the last century. Purslane's ratio is approximately 4 to 1. That balance matters as much as the raw omega-3 number, because it's the imbalance between omega-6 and omega-3 that drives the inflammatory signaling cascade, not simply a deficiency of one in isolation. Beyond its fatty acid profile, purslane carries meaningful amounts of vitamin C, vitamin A in beta-carotene, magnesium, potassium, and betalains, the specific antioxidant pigments responsible for the faint reddish tint along some purslane stems. Betalains are structurally distinct from both carotenoids and flavonoids, studied in their own right for anti-inflammatory and antioxidant effects, and found in relatively few plants outside of beets and a handful of other species. If you find purslane growing in your yard, harvest it from areas you know have not been treated with pesticides or herbicides. Rinse it thoroughly. Eaten raw, it has a mild, slightly lemony, mildly mucilaginous crunch. Think of a cross between watercress and cucumber, lightly sautéed in olive oil with garlic. It becomes a simple side dish that would be at home in a Greek kitchen, a Mexican kitchen, or a traditional Chinese household. 2 minutes on medium heat is sufficient. More than that, and the texture loses its appeal. This weed, growing through your driveway cracks, has been feeding human beings since before written history began. The ancient world didn't ignore it. We are the first culture in human history to throw it away. Here is the one point that runs through every item on this list, and it's the thing most people miss, even after they've learned what to eat. Processing strips the compound. Every active element discussed in this countdown, the alpha-linolenic acid in walnuts, the sesamin in sesame, the sulforaphane in Brussels sprouts, the betalains in purslane, the fat-protective polyphenols in pomegranate, exists in a form the body can use only when the food is minimally altered. Heat beyond a certain threshold denatures the enzymes. Refining removes the membrane structure where the fats are housed. Exposure to light and oxygen over time degrades the polyunsaturated chains into compounds that produce the opposite of what you want. This is not a caution against cooking. It is a caution against the assumption that the name of a food on a label guarantees what it once contained. Rough, unfiltered, cold-pressed, freshly ground, whole. These are not marketing adjectives. They are the functional difference between a food that delivers what this research describes and one that carries the name but not the compound. The monks on Mount Athos were not eating processed sesame paste from a plastic jar that had been on a shelf for 18 months. They were eating what grew in their gardens and on their hillsides, prepared simply. That day, or the day before, the ancients didn't have laboratories. They had something we've largely traded away, an intimate, unbroken relationship with food in the form it actually existed in alive, fresh, to whole, and real. Here is the question worth sitting with after you close this video. If the wealthiest societies in human history are simultaneously the most nutritionally depleted, what does that tell us about what we've decided to call food? If this kind of inquiry matters to you, leave a comment below, telling me what you want us to explore next, whether that's a specific plant, a biblical food tradition, or a particular health concern. Hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone in your life who needs to hear that the most powerful medicine may already be growing in their garden, sitting in their spice rack, or waiting in the produce section of their local store. Ignored and underestimated. The body knows what it needs. It has always known. We are only now rediscovering how to listen.